Good afternoon. I'm Anna Koyman here in New York City. It's Sunday, August the 25th, 3 o'clock on the East Coast. The Middle East on the brink, sparking fears of an all-out war. It's time for NewsNation Now.
Israel will not tolerate Hezbollah's attacks on our civilians. We are operating in self-defense from Hezbollah and any other enemy that joins in their attacks against us. And we are ready to do everything we need to defend the people of Israel.
Heavy explosions in Lebanon, air raid sirens echoing in the streets of Israel, marking one of the largest exchanges of firepower with Hezbollah in months. The IDF releasing this video saying they launched a, quote, preemptive strike targeting the militant group. About 100 Israeli fighter jets destroying rocket launchers across Lebanon. Shortly after, Hezbollah responding, firing over 300 rockets and a barrage of drones at Israel. The country's Iron Dome responding to defend citizens. The terrorist group saying it's all in response to the assassination of a top military commander last month. At least 3 people in Lebanon have died. There are no reported deaths in Israel. IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari calling their strikes self-defense.
In a self-defense act to remove these threats, the IDF is striking terror targets in Lebanon from which Hezbollah was planning to launch their attacks on Israeli civilians. This follows more than 6,700 rockets, missiles, and explosive UAVs fired by Hezbollah at Israeli families, homes, and communities since October 8th.
Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking to his war cabinet earlier, telling them their attack in Lebanon minimized Hezbollah's strike today, acknowledging this is not the end of the conflict and delivering this stark warning.
We are determined to do everything possible to protect our country, to return the residents of the North safely to their homes, and to continue to uphold a simple rule: whoever harms us, we harm him.
As tensions and fears grow in the Middle East, hope continues in Egypt. Negotiators are back at it in Cairo with a renewed push for a peace deal, a Hamas representative arriving last night. They will look at the 3-phase peace plans proposed by President Joe Biden. The White House insists Netanyahu has already accepted the deal. The U.S. is remaining optimistic that a deal can be reached, potentially ending this 10-month-long war. It all comes less than 24 hours after Israeli protesters hit the streets of Tel Aviv, demanding to bring all the hostages home, ringing out throughout the city. And joining us now is former IDF spokesperson, retired Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. He's now a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense Democracies. Thanks for joining us on NewsNation Now again. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So all of this, there are concerns now that an all-out war could potentially draw in the United States, Iran, militant groups across the region. What's your read on the situation at this hour?
Yeah, the only update I have to your introduction, which I think was very succinct, is that sadly, reports coming out of Cairo is that Hamas has rejected the ceasefire deal and that they are not going to go ahead, which is bad. Bad for the families of the hostages, bad for people in Gaza, and also bad in a general sense, because if there's no hostage and ceasefire deal, the likelihood of escalation elsewhere in the Middle East rises. And that is definitely room for concern for Israelis and I think for people living around Israel. I know that the U.S. has been conducting some very effective diplomacy in order to try to limit the chances of this spiraling out into a regional war. But unfortunately, the fact that now Hamas has said that they're not going to agree with the agreement, the Biden proposal, that's not a good sign, which may indicate that we will be in for additional violence and instability, both in Gaza and in Lebanon, and maybe also with Iran.
Well, you're helping us report that new information then that Hamas has rejected the ceasefire. If you guys in the control room can check on that with what we have coming in on the wires, et cetera. Another fear is that should Hezbollah send a number of rockets into Israel all at once, that would be a tough blow. The retaliation Netanyahu has vowed would be catastrophic. Is there any way to diffuse these tensions?
Yeah, you're definitely right. And that's exactly why the IDF, what Israel did in early morning hours today, Israel time, what Israel did was to strike the rocket launchers before they could fire a very large amount of rockets. And that's why it's so important, because you're very right. Once the rockets are airborne, it is a very daunting task for even the best air defenses in the world that Israel has to actually shoot all of the rockets out of the sky and protect Israeli civilians. And the best way of stopping them is making sure that they never leave the ground. And that's what Israel did in what I must say was quite an extraordinary accomplishment. I think the importance of what Israel did in the early morning hours is twofold. One, it saved a lot of human life in Israel and also indirectly in Lebanon. But second, and perhaps almost as important than saving lives, is that it also indicated to Hezbollah that the IDF has very good visibility and intel capabilities when it comes to reading and assessing Hezbollah's intentions. This is something that's new, both for Israel and for Hezbollah, something that Hezbollah probably did not prepare for. And this will now force the terrorist organization to recalculate. And they're coming to the understanding that the IDF was one step ahead of them. And we will for sure see them develop their capabilities and adjust to this in the future.
Okay. And Jonathan, could you share your sources that are telling you that Hamas has rejected the ceasefire deal? We do not have that confirmed here.
Yeah, I'm reading it on Arab media outlets. It's still not in the on the U.S. wires, etc. I suppose it'll come out soon. I hope that it's wrong. I would like for that to be wrong, and I'd love for the correction to be Hamas is accepting it, and we're going to get hostages back and a ceasefire. But I don't think that's going to be the case. But we'll wait a few minutes, and then the updates will come.
Okay. Well, nonetheless, even the developments that have been happening overnight. I woke up at 3 o'clock and just happened to turn on the TV and saw all of this going on. I'm thinking, what about these negotiations that are going on in Cairo? What about these hostages and trying to get them home? What's next?
Yeah, you're very right. Listen, it's a very complex situation, and I don't want to be the doomsayer, but this situation, I think, is going to continue for a long time. This instability, the violence, the terror, the attacks against Israel, the suffering in Gaza, which I am not overlooking and belittling. There's a lot of suffering there. There's a lot of suffering in Israel. But I think that this horrible situation will continue until the source and the root cause is dealt with, until Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, is held accountable by Israel and perhaps by other countries, but I'm not counting on any other country to do the work for Israel. But until Iran is held accountable for their acts of aggression in the region, I don't think that we will see a stable Middle East. And I know that that is a big thing to say, because what that means is that we still have a lot of bad ahead of us before we can get to seeing something good. But the fact of the reality is that Israel is surrounded by Iranian proxy terrorist organizations who stand to gain from continuing the fighting, and Israel stands to lose from continuing the fighting. A long and protracted war is not good for Israel. It's not good for civilians in the region. But sadly, that is what we're seeing. And frankly, not really an end in sight, despite all the suffering. So bottom line, until we deal with Iran and until we impress upon them that it is not in their interest to continue with the violence and supporting terror, I don't think that they'll stop.
Yeah, that's what we have to remember, is that it all goes back to Iran. Former IDF spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, thank you so much. You're a very great guest for us to have, and we hope that you'll come back on the program. Thank you.
I will gladly do so. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.